Hello, I'm Dr. Terry Ann Scott, and I'll be your host today. I'm the director of the Institute for Common Power and an author, professor, and historian. I left a position as an associate professor from Hood College, where I was chair of the history department, and I formerly worked at the University of Washington to direct the Institute because of the gravity of the moment. The Institute is an educational branch of Common Power, a Seattle-based voting justice organization. And at the Institute, what we do is we work outside of the classroom. We illuminate undervalued, underappreciated, pivotal aspects of our collective history, all with the goal of turning this education into action. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Seahawks, Our Journey Forward. We have partnered with the Seahawks for the past 3 years to go on the Institute for Common Power's Truth and Purpose Learning Tour, an exploration of the South and an exploration of self and an exploration of how we can continue to push justice forward. The name of this series, Our Journey Forward, refers to what we experienced on the Truth and Purpose Learning Tour. The goal of the series is to recount our experiences and takeaways on a more personal level through conversation. You're going to hear from the participants. You will feel their passion, their transformation. Our Journey Forward reflects the mission of searching for truth while standing for justice. It's an ongoing journey that requires all of us. The title of this episode is The Walk, which we'll explain in just a bit. But before we begin, let's meet our panel. Hello. Hi.
Hello. Hello.
Ed, we'll start with you.
Oh, sure. Well, Dr. Scott, thank you very much for having me. I'm Ed Goins. I'm a Chief Legal Officer for the Seahawks. I've been with the Seahawks for 12 years, going to my 12th season, but I've actually been in the NFL for 17 years.
Right. Thank you. Ari.
Hi, my name is Ari Horton, and I am a digital media coordinator for the Seahawks. So I produce written and social content for the team.
And Luke.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Luke Mitchner. I'm a public school teacher. I teach in the Bellevue School District. This is my 11th year at Bellevue High School, and I'm also an education specialist with the Institute for Common Power. And I've traveled on all 3 of the Truth and Purpose learning tours with the Seahawks. It's been a huge honor.
And you literally just rushed here from class to get here.
Yeah, today's a school day. We're making it work.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks for being here. So as a result of Luke's work in education and on these tours, in 2024, the Seahawks presented him with their Delta Community Captain Award. As Luke mentioned, he's been on multiple journeys. You've gone on all 3 with the Seahawks and several others with the Institute when we've had educators.
Yep.
So our 2 guests here from the Seahawks today are considered alumni of the Truth and Purpose learning experience. Ed, you went in 2023, the first journey.
I did.
And Ari, you went last year, 2024.
Yeah, Truth and Purpose too.
All right. So it has been over a year, 2 years for you. I'd love to hear how you look back on your experience and what you have carried with you. So Ari, we'll start with you.
Yeah, for sure. I think when I think back on the trip, it's something that you never really forget, and you always carry a little piece of it with you every single day.
Mm-hmm.
The trip was full of just invaluable learning. Just you learned every single day. And when I think about something that I've taken away from it, it's just I look at things with a totally different lens, and I'm thinking about my work that I do. Like, how is this going to be, taken by people on the outside? How are people going to digest this? And I think that trip kind of put these different glasses on me. They talk about rose-colored glasses. I put these different colored glasses on, and now I just see everything through a different lens because of this trip.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. So what about you, Ed? What have you carried?
Yeah, so as you said, it was 2 years ago that I first went.
Yeah.
I think coming into it, I thought I knew everything because I was born and raised in the South, in Arkansas, as a black man, particularly just outside of segregation. So I felt like, I would almost be a teacher more than a student on this trip.
Mm-hmm.
And I was completely wrong. I mean, just way wrong about that because even though I grew up in the South, in the South as a black man, I learned the legacy that I had inherited. I actually learned why things happened. I learned what we were receiving, what I grew up to receiving. I learned the genesis of it, and in the sort of overwhelming, immersive way of that institution that I never learned before. I think my parents and my grandparents, aunts and uncles were all recipients of it, but not truly understanding why it happened and how how certain narratives got foisted upon them. And so for me, it was a learning experience much more than as I came in sort of like thinking, oh yeah, I know all this. I'm going to tell people stories they probably never heard before. And that's exactly what happened to me. Stories I learned I've never heard before, and just opened my mind and my spirit to how I got here.
Do you feel like it gave you a better understanding of your family, your elders before you?
Absolutely. It made me appreciate more of who they are and sort of why they are. And sometimes even in a way that I don't appreciate. They may be more passive or not as actively doing things I think that they should do. It's because of that history that they've been beaten down with.
Yeah. And we covered a lot of ground. It's interesting to say that you are from the South, but you didn't necessarily know it. We hear that a lot when we go to the different places. So on this episode, calling it The Walk, we're calling it that because we are quite literally walking in these different spaces. We start in Atlanta, and then we go to Anniston, Alabama, and then we stay all 5 nights in Montgomery, but we traverse the entire state of Alabama, exploring civil rights history, exploring African-American history, exploring broadly what is, in fact, our collective history. And we walk. In the Institute for Common Power, we have something we call movement learning. And so movement learning is about going to the places where history is done. It's about learning from the movements of the past, and it's about moving the strategy and perseverance into a better future. And so we do a walking tour in Montgomery, and we went to one of the places would be at the Capitol. Luke, you have been to Montgomery's Capitol many times.
Yeah.
When you walk up to the Capitol, there is a statue of Jefferson Davis that welcomes you as though he was a legitimate president. He's not even from Alabama. He's from Mississippi. So what has your experience been specifically when we're at the Capitol? Because you teach us while we're there.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I think the state capitol in Alabama is a really interesting place for us to spend some time on the Truth and Purpose Learning Tour, because it so neatly ties in some of the contemporary issues that we face with the history. The fact that we're confronted with a statue of Jefferson Davis, and there's a number of other pieces of Confederate iconography on the Capitol grounds there, I think reflects our current tensions around the truth in the ways that we teach and learn history. And as a professional educator in a public classroom that teaches history, I'm confronted regularly with challenges to curriculum or book bannings in our profession right now. That's a real challenge that we're facing. And this sort of narrative of history that's told on that state capitol grounds reflects the challenges to that curriculum and the book bans, et cetera, that we're facing today. So I think there's this really powerful way for us to have a hard conversation about, teaching hard truths to students in the 21st century by it feels like you're standing in the 19th century when you're standing in that space. So it's just really powerful to be there and be in community to then reflect on ourselves a bit. Yeah.
And you bring up a good point that we're facing book bans. I mean, you're right there on the front lines as an educator. We have challenges against truth right now in curriculum. It's fair to say that much of what we learn on this journey, we would not be able to talk about in some places in the country. One of the places that we go to as well is Auburn Avenue in downtown Atlanta. And so just to set the context for everybody, we meet in Atlanta. We start very early in the morning, and then we get on the bus and we travel all over these 2 states. Now, people often ask, do you sleep on the bus? No, we don't sleep on the bus. We sleep in a nice hotel. But we do spend a lot of time on the bus. We're building community, but we are walking. So we're off of the bus, we're walking. We walk down Auburn Avenue because it was called Sweet Auburn Avenue. And it was called Sweet Auburn Avenue because at one point it was considered the most prosperous African-American community in the country. We hear about Tulsa, we hear about other spaces. We don't hear about Sweet Auburn Avenue. So Ari, do you remember walking Auburn Avenue, and what was that like?
Yes, I remember walking, and there was a mural as we were walking under the underpass, and it had names of different businesses, and one of the businesses that stood out was Bronner Brothers, and I was like, oh, I've heard of that before. And we continue walking under the underpass, and then I remember we stopped, and you start to talk, and we're all kind of in a group, and I'm like, I can't hear her. It's so loud. It's like the car's driving over, it's very disruptive. And then you hear the story of what we're standing under and why we're standing under it. And it comes full circle, and it's like, wow, I can't hear her because I'm being disrupted by the cars. And then I think about the community that used to be there, and they were disrupted because an overpass was built straight through their community. And thinking about the intentionality of making sure that that community could no longer be, because it's just like, hey, let's build this overpass, when in fact they could have built it a couple blocks down and that community still could be there and thriving today. And that was just a very interesting part to see, more so because of, I said it, but the intentionality of making sure that that community didn't know peace. And then there we are standing there again, and I'm still being disrupted because of that overpass.
Wow, what a metaphor to think about not knowing peace. They're cultivating this space. Auburn Avenue is where the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was headquartered. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, two of the key civil rights organizations. It's also where Dr. King was born. His house is right there at the far end of Auburn Avenue, Ebenezer Baptist Church that he co-pastored with his father. Thriving Black community. People say, what happened to it? And you phrased it so well. What disrupted the peace, what disrupted the prosperity was the freeway. It's this historic truth that freeways often have destroyed intentionally African-American prosperous communities. And so we're walking, and we walk also in Montgomery, all over the city. I mean, now we go there so often, we see people who know us, who live there.
Our favorite coffee shop.
And our favorite coffee shop, Prevail, is right there as well. And so, Ed, on Saturday, so Thursday, we're in Auburn Avenue. Friday, we're doing this walking tour and going to the Capitol that Luke described. Saturday, we're doing all things related to the Equal Justice Initiative. Started by Brian Stevenson, who was a Harvard-educated attorney who said that he didn't learn the kind of law he wanted to do. He wanted to challenge racial disparities in the criminal justice system. And so a bunch of attorneys who are civil rights attorneys create a history museum to teach us why we need to do the work we're doing. And they created a memorial to racial terror lynching. Can you talk to us about what it was like to go to those spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk about Brian Stevenson in part because when I first got here in 2014, I remember meeting this person, Brian Stevenson, here in Seattle. He was fundraising for this museum he wanted to build. That was in 2015. I met him over at downtown Seattle. So I was excited to go see like what came of it, you know, yeah. and it was, and so and I remember even before that, thinking about when you took us to the river and into the side, the banks where slaves were brought off the ships and shackled and walked through down this main street that now we know is Commerce Street.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're the commerce. And so that really had an impact on me. And I think I wanted to get to the Legacy Museum to see more of that and to learn more about how we were, how Black people in this country were thought of sort of chattel.
Yeah.
And so the museum, it's hard to describe because I, again, had this preconceived idea of like, I know these things. Mm-hmm. I know what's happened. But to walk into that first exhibit that I saw, at least, was the holding pens and having family members ask questions like, hey, have you seen my mother? Or have you seen my daughter? And describing her. And to know that these were real stories, and or based on writings or what have you, that really it hit me because it made me think about my own kids, made me think about my mom, my family members, and to have this or sort of immersive experience with it, I felt like they were truly talking to me and talking about my family, and then moving through from there onto, and I wrote some notes down because. Certain things stick with you so strongly, but then you go back, I look at our itinerary, and I'm just like, oh, I actually printed out the itinerary from 2 years ago.
I love that.
And it started to well up thoughts in me. Yeah. And so then, you move from there to the transatlantic slave trade and how well sort of documented it was. Mm-hmm. And given that I'm a lawyer, I'm going to be very focused on documentation, focused on evidentiary proof, and that's what this museum does, whether it's the transatlantic slave trade, the domestic slave trade, the racial terror and lynching, all these sort of firsthand accounts, whether it's newspaper clippings or writings. You can't sort of wordsmith that stuff. That's actually what happened, and so that hit me. And then I think the big one was all the Jim Crow and segregation signage in so many different areas of life. I always knew about the water fountains or, the buses, obviously. But the smallest of things in our society were so orchestrated to be harmful and to be abusive to the African American people, that it really had an impact on me again about my own family members, and to know that they went through that. So I think the museum, which I didn't get a chance to, I told you I'm going to go back because I want to go back. I have to go back and sit down with each section because I had to rush through the mass incarceration section. So that. I think I couldn't have spent better money for the Brian Stevenson donation back in 15.
Oh, that's great.
Because
you helped get the museum
started. I helped
started.
get the museum started. So, yeah. So it's an amazing place.
And it charts, and you did such a good job of talking about the different things that are in there, because it charts enslavement through mass incarceration.
Absolutely.
And so should people think that there is a disconnect, you will be completely disillusioned when you see that it is actually very much connected. So,
with evidence.
And as an attorney, you're looking for that evidence.
Absolutely.
Right. It is a history we cannot deny, period.
Absolutely.
No matter how hard some forces are trying to have us deny it, we can't deny it.
Yep.
So you've all laid out different aspects of this. It is just in this time frame, in the short time that we've talked, it's easy to see that when we go on this Truth and Purpose learning experience, we are learning so much. But we are processing, and I've said it's a journey through self, and it's a journey through community building, because we're walking away as a community. I would assume that it's okay to say that each of you came back here with stronger bonds to the folks you work with.
Absolutely. Yep. I think we see more of each other, right? I mean, at the beginning we saw each other for our functional roles, and then you may have made some natural friends with others, but now we have this natural bond that, when I see Ari, I know, like, it's not that she has an incredible skill for what she does, but for her as a person.
Yeah. I agree. And it goes across Truth and Purpose tours as well. Just me and Ed didn't even go on the same Truth and Purpose tour.
Right.
But because of that, like, we're forever connected now. And I know I can go to those people in the office and they'll just get it because they also went on the trip.
They went on that trip too. And I want to kind of close with this, and then I'm going to ask each of you to share that. I'll start with you, Luke, and we'll just kind of go around the circle. This is heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And we recognize it on the trip. So at the Institute, we try always to be very intentional about processing, about talking about it, about tying it to today, because we want to historicize our modern environment. And we always are intentional about hope and action. And so if we think about what we take away from this tough stuff into today, what is it that on the journey, or since you've reflected on it, gives you hope to know that we have the power to create a better future, a just and inclusive democracy?
Yeah. What gives me hope? I think I'd like to talk a little bit about a couple of folks we meet with on the Truth and Purpose tour that give me hope. And their names are Mr. Charles Malden and Miss Joanne Bland. And they're a couple of foot soldiers who were they were children. They were in their, like, Miss Joanne was 11 she was a child when she marched across the Pettus Bridge, and Mr. Charles was a student leader of the Dallas County Youth League at 17 years old when he marched across the Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday. And their courage in that moment, which has carried through to today, they are still exceptionally courageous people who are continuing to tell this story because they know the urgency of knowing this history and carrying this message forward. I work with young people every day. And so for them to be 11 and 17 in that moment, and the students in my room every day are 15, 16, 17, just makes me feel that sense of urgency in teaching their history and telling their story. Mr. Charles, we're very fortunate that he was able to join my class yesterday for a Zoom call and talked with my students for 45 minutes to tell his story about youth organizing in Selma. And I think what gives me hope is that, we've got models to follow. Their leadership is incredible, and and their story is there for us to take forward with us. That gives me a lot of hope. Yeah.
What about you?
For me, I think I get the most hope from knowing that people who don't look like me also care. And going on the trip actually showed me that. Like, some of the coworkers that I have also actually care about these things just as much as I do. And I think that's what gives me hope, because it feels like sometimes it could just be very siloed to think that only Black Americans have to care about these things. But going on this trip opened my eyes to see that no, like other people care about these things and are actually passionate about change just as much as I am.
Yeah, I think in some ways both Luke and Ari took my answers, but I think I can say that the tie together is one, my kids. I'm able to now pass on to my kids knowledge about true knowledge about our past and get them excited about wanting to go to the museum, which I'm going to take them to, and perhaps on the next trip we can.
I hope so.
You did invite them, so
I did.
I may take you up on that. So they're excited about that. But I think also to your point, Ari, about the other people who aren't African American who care about this issue, shows me that, reminds me that they were around back then too. That it took all of us, right? That it did take not just the African American resistance and resiliency, which was absolutely there, but for others to care and act. And I think that's the takeaway I have, is that they were always there, and they're here now, and they're gonna be here tomorrow. So how do we galvanize that group?
Yeah, that beauty and uplifting humanity crosses through gender and race and generation and everything. So absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for all of us being here on this episode of The Walk, as we walk into, with this movement learning, walk into a better future that is defined by hope and power. Because we know that if Mr. Charles and Miss Bland could do what they did at that age, then we can do anything. So thank you so much.